Welcome back. So today we're talking about something that basically defines European history. Their absolutely obsessive love of fighting each other. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, if Europe was a person, it would be someone who gets into a fight every single weekend, then complains that everyone else is the problem. So buckle up, because we're about to explore why Europe spent literally centuries beating the crap out of each other over things like checks notes, a succession, a religion disagreement, or someone's bruised ego. Stick around. All right, so here's the first thing you need to understand about Europe. It's basically designed for conflict. Think about it. Unlike Asia, which has massive empires that can just expand outward and call it a day, Europe is like packed. It's got like 40-plus countries crammed onto a continent that's not even as big as North America. You've got mountains cutting countries apart, the Alps, the Pyrenees, the Carpathians, which meant that instead of one unified super empire, you got a bunch of kingdoms that were kind of close to each other, but not close enough to be friends, close enough to be annoyed. Imagine if your house was right next to your neighbor's house, and the only thing separating you was a really inconvenient mountain range. Yeah, you're gonna have problems. And here's the kicker. Europe has rivers. Lots of them. The Rhine, the Danube, the Thames. And who controls the rivers? That's right. Whoever controls the trade controls the money. And whoever controls the money? They feel pretty bold about starting wars. So geographically, Europe was basically set up to be a giant group chat that never stops arguing. The stage was set. All it needed were some drama queens with egos the size of, well, Europe itself. But here's where it gets really fun. Geography alone doesn't explain why Europe fought so much. Plenty of places are geographically crowded and don't spend 500 years stabbing each other. No, Europe's real problem was that every single country had the exact same idea at the same time. We should be the biggest, strongest, most powerful kingdom on the continent. This is where we get to the actual reason behind all the wars. European royalty had collective narcissism disorder, and I don't mean that as a joke. I mean it. These were people who genuinely believed that they were special, that God literally chose them to rule. That's what the divine right of kings was all about. You didn't just rule because you were powerful or smart. You ruled because God said so. And if you believed that, well, then any other king's existence was basically an insult. So let's say you're the king of France. You think you're God's favorite. Then the Holy Roman Emperor says, "Actually, I'm God's favorite." What do? You go to war, obviously. The problem is, every single king thought this. The King of France thought France should run everything. The Holy Roman Emperor thought the Holy Roman Empire should run everything. The King of Spain thought Spain should run everything. The King of England, oh boy, England, thought England should basically run France too. Spoiler, that whole thing was a disaster. And here's the beautiful part. They were all right. They were all super convinced. It wasn't like one person was delusional and the rest were normal. No, they were all delusional in exactly the same way. It's like if you put 5 people in a room and everyone was convinced they should be the leader. Except instead of a room, it's a continent. And instead of arguing, they declare war. Now, you might be thinking, but wait, didn't they have reasons for these wars? Weren't there actual disputes they were fighting about? And yeah, technically, yes. But here's the thing about European wars. The stated reason and the actual reason were often different. The stated reason might be something like, "Oh, we're fighting over this territory because of a succession dispute." But the actual reason was, "We're fighting because our king got pissy that the other king got a better harvest this year, and he needs to prove he's not a loser." It's like if 2 guys get into a fistfight at a bar over a pool game, but really, it's because one guy's girlfriend laughed at the other guy's joke. The pool game is the excuse. The ego is the actual reason. And Europe? Europe was a lot of excuses. Now, before we talk about the specific wars, and there are so many, we need to talk about the system that made this even worse. Medieval feudalism. If you don't know what feudalism was, imagine this. You have a king at the top. That king doesn't actually control all the land himself. Instead, he gives chunks of land to nobles. The nobles promise to be loyal to the king. And, in exchange, they get to be rich, powerful, and run their own little fiefdoms. Sounds fine, right? Except there's a problem. Those nobles also got land from other nobles. Or their fathers did. Or their uncles. Or their cousins. So you've got this absurdly complicated web of who owes what to whom. And it's so tangled that nobody's actually sure who's in charge of anything. And then, sometimes a king dies. And his kids fight over who gets to be the next king. And the nobles can't agree. So half the nobles support one kid and half support the other. And suddenly, you've got a civil war. But wait, it gets worse. Because while these internal feuds are happening, the neighboring kingdom is like, hey, you guys are distracted. Mind if we just take some of your land? So now you've got two civil wars happening at the same time, plus an invasion from a neighbor. And everyone's also fighting with the church because the Pope disagrees with the king. And the king's actually related to the Pope, but they still hate each other because it's Europe. It's like a group project where nobody agrees on anything. Everyone has a personal vendetta, and instead of handing in the assignment, you just all fight about it. The feudal system basically created permanent instability. It made it so that, at any given moment, there were multiple legitimate claims to any given piece of land. And when you've got multiple legitimate claims, you get wars. Lots of wars. Lots and lots of wars. Okay, so let's actually talk about some of these wars. And I'm not going to list all of them. That would take like 5 hours. But let me give you the highlights. First, you've got the 100 Years' War. And yes, it's exactly as ridiculous as it sounds. It wasn't actually 100 years, it was more like 116 years. But who's counting? Oh wait, everyone was counting. The point is, England and France basically got into the world's longest family feud because both of them thought they should rule France. Yes, you read that right. England thought they should rule France. And they were so convinced that they literally invaded. Multiple times. It took 116 years to figure out that it wasn't working. Then you've got the Wars of the Spanish Succession. Again, literally in the name, it's a war about who gets to be king of Spain. There were so many people who had a claim on the Spanish throne that they basically just all showed up with armies and said, "It's me, I'm the king now." And the entire continent got involved. Because that's the thing about European wars. They couldn't stay isolated. They'd start in one country and then drag in everyone else. Then there were the Italian Wars, fought between, get this, the Holy Roman Empire and France and Spain and literally everyone else, over Italy, for about 65 years. Because apparently, nobody could just let Italy be Italy. And don't even get me started on the 30 Years' War. That one was supposedly about religion, Catholics versus Protestants. But by the end, everyone forgot about the religion part and just fought because that's what they were doing. It was basically a war that forgot why it started. The point is, pick any 50-year span in European history between like 1300 and 1800, and I guarantee there was a major war happening. Usually multiple, simultaneously. At one point, you could literally be traveling through Europe and cross through 5 different active war zones in a single week. It was absolute chaos. Now here's the thing that really shows it was mostly about European neurosis. Other continents didn't do this. Like, sure, Asia had wars. The Middle East had wars. But they didn't have this endless, constant, escalating cycle of everyone fighting everyone else. Why? Well, partly it's because Asia had huge empires that actually managed to conquer and control large territories. The Mongol Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Mughal Empire, they were massive. Once you've conquered half the world, you're not as interested in fighting your neighbors because, well, you've already conquered them. But Europe? Europe could never quite pull off a continental empire. It tried. Napoleon got close. But the continent was so divided, so stubborn, and so full of people convinced they deserved to be in charge, that nobody ever pulled it off. Instead, Europe just had centuries of stalemate. Everyone was strong enough to fight, but nobody was strong enough to win permanently. So you'd have a war. One guy would win, and then everyone would be mad about it. And then there'd be another war. It's like if you had 5 chess players at a table, and every time someone won, the other 4 would gang up on them until they lost. And then they'd all fight each other until someone else won. And then they'd gang up on that person. Except, with actual swords, and actual death, and actual economic collapse. So, to bring it all together, why did Europe have so many wars? It's not really one thing. It's geography. They're all packed together. It's ideology. Everyone thought they deserved to rule. It's feudalism, which made everything messy and complicated. And it's just culture. Europe developed a culture where conflict was how you solved problems. And honestly, this is probably why Europe eventually colonized the entire world. They got so good at warfare and politics and backstabbing that they basically exported it to everywhere else. Which is not great. But at least now you understand why. Europe spent 500 years basically telling each other, "You're not the boss of me." And it was the most European thing that ever happened. Anyway, that's why Europe had so many wars. Because of egos, geography, and a fundamental inability to get along. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, please smash that like button, subscribe, and let me know in the comments which European war you think was the pettiest. Because honestly, they were all pretty petty. See you in the next one. Peace.